Welcome back to the Woodgrafter, part 2 in our 3-part series looking at the Dewalt DWE 7485. Today we're going to calibrate this thing and just take some first cuts to see what we think. That sounds good? Stick around. So in the last video we unboxed this thing, we looked at its features and we just measured it for calibration out of the box without making any changes. And we noticed that the yellow plate, the throat plate as it's actually called, is about 1 millimeter low from the surface, so we need to adjust that. We noticed that the blade was cutting perfectly to 90 degrees, but when we got to the 45 degree angle we noticed it was about 0.4 degrees out of calibration. Not a lot, but enough to knock us out if we were doing some mitre joints as a prime example in our furniture building. There's an adjustment for that as well, so we're going to have a look at that. We did see that the blade is perfectly parallel to the two T-tracks and that the fence itself out of the box is parallel to the blade. There are some adjustments, but I'm not going to adjust it because mine's bang on, and I imagine that's a pretty consistent experience. We did see that the scale is reading out by about 1 millimeter, so we need to adjust the overall scale. So today we're going to calibrate this thing so we can put it to use in our workshop, and the first thing I want to look at is that throat plate. Here's our throat plate. If I wind my blade down out of the way, and I come with a straight edge and lay it across the table, there is the fence, then we can clearly see that there's a gap there underneath that straight edge. So what we want to do is be able to lift this plate up a little bit to get rid of that gap. And similarly at the front edge here, I've got a similar sort of gap. Now that gap's about 1 millimeter. So out of the box, the plate was 1 millimeter away from these two grey edges that we're looking for. Now these 4 screws here, 1, 2, 3 and 4, are actually captive inside the throat plate. This one here, the 5th one, allows us to quickly take out the throat plate, assuming I can find my screwdriver. And you can see that those 4 screws here, 1, 2, 3 and 4, actually rest on these 4 lugs, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So with this throat plate in, I should be able to just screw that down and raise up the throat plate until it's flush with the surface. Now I've just got a bit of scrap wood here and you can see that the front is fine now, that's not catching anywhere, but the back, that's catching. And what's interesting is that plate is distorting ever so slightly here at the back. So the way this is designed, these back clips here just aren't good enough to hold that into place, which is disappointing, I think. I don't think it's going to matter in use because that's going to cut across, but it does mean that you need to put pressure down on the top as you're making the cut, otherwise your wood will sort of slope up in this direction ever so slightly. So disappointing that. So there's the first challenge I think on this. This plate here isn't really designed well enough as a throat insert to do its job. I would have liked to have seen these captive clips here. Oh, hold on a minute. Now I've just dropped that back in again and that now seems to have clipped in at the back. Oh, that's strange. So there does seem to be a bit of a technique of driving that in. Put it in, push it all the way to the end and then lock it into place. And that now seems to sit well enough. Okay, bit of messing around there, but that now is sitting perfectly flush, which is what I wanted it to. Now you need to keep your eye on that, because if you put that plate in haste, then this back wood spring up, but I've got it. It's there. There's now good enough for my wood's not going to catch. Next thing I want to do is to calibrate this front thing here. That's no harder than undoing these two screws and moving this left and right. So I'm just going to drop this in again, drop the fence in and lock it down. And the first thing I'm going to do is to look at the zero. I'm going to raise this up and I'm going to bring in the fence so it's just resting on the blade. And once I'm touching that blade, I'm going to lock it down. Now that is reading just off the zero, so I'm just going to loosen these off and just adjust that to be bang on zero. Now, although I'm adjusting this, I'll probably never use this gauge. I don't tend to use these type of gauges, to be honest with you. I tend to measure what it is that I need, but it's good to know we can do it. Now I'm going to move this to 10 centimeters, and I want to measure from the outside cutting edge of that tooth 100 millimeters, and that is now pretty much bang on. Now we know it's parallel, but I'm just going to drop the riving knife out, a couple of turns of that knob, take it out. We saw that in the last video, and just measure this to the outside cutting edge of that tooth there, which is bang on. This is now reading 10 centimeters, 100 millimeters, and that gap there is indeed 10 centimeters, 100. Now I'm going to move it out to, how far will this thing go, to 40, and lock it down at 40, 400 millimeters. And that is reading bang on 400, and that is reading, if I get the right tooth, .400 as well. So that's pretty much bang on now, so we're happy with that. Now while the fence is out of the way, I want to have a look at this here. Just going to bring you back in on porter cam again and show you what's going on. So just here there is an Allen key, and if we look at the back of the device, we will see that that Allen key is actually connected to this cam here. As I'm moving the blade, this piece here, this aluminium piece, catches onto that cam. So I've now moved the blade to the 45-degree position, and I'm dropping my little calibration block in here, and I'm zeroing it down, and I'm just going to drop it onto the blade, and that blade is reading 44.8. So I'm coming in with a 4mm hex, and I'm just loosening off that cam that we saw. I'm just moving that cam out of the way for the time being, and I'm just going to move this up a little bit further till I get to that 45 degrees I want. And then with that set to 45, I'm going to just bring that cam in so it rests on the edge. I'll just tighten that down. And there we go. I've now got that set to 45 degrees. Now what I do find with this particular digital box, I'm not sure whether it's just the trend one or they're all like this, that it's very, very sensitive. It's overly sensitive, so I could zero it on the bench. And then just by changing the position of it, the angle changes from the vertical. So I don't have a lot of confidence in this box. But what I do have a bit more confidence in the angle finder. So I've zeroed the angle finder down. And I'm just going to bring that in against the blade, and that's now giving me bang on 45 degrees. So that is now reaching a 45-degree angle. I've got it set down to 45 degrees here, and I've got that cam locked into place. Now in theory, I should be able to loosen the blade, And now bring it back in to 45. Lock it in and see what we get. We're back to 45. So we know that everything's parallel. We know that the calibration gauge distance from the fence from the blade is calibrated. And I know that my angles are good. And that's pretty much it. And that took about 10, 12 minutes to get this thing finally calibrated. So what we'll now do, we'll just make some cuts, very, very simple cuts. What I think I'll do first, I'm just going to bring this board down to 400. So I'm just going to set this measurement here to be 400. Remember to use the yellow, which is going to be there. Going to drop the fence down so it's supporting the material. Drop the blade down for safety so it's just slightly above the material. I'm just coming to make a clean cut here. First of all, give us a reference edge. Not sure what that size is, but that's what we'll do it at. Drop some dust extraction on the back. Actually, first things first, I'm going to drop this blade out of the way just to try something. And I'm going to just put our decibel meter on. Okay, so I'm just going to take a background noise reading here. So we look at the average. So we had an average of about 31.8. Turn the machine on, and then I'll redo that experiment. Let's see how loud this actually is. Never started this before, so I'm going to stand off to one side. Now you can see that averaged out in the 100.3, which is way into the red zone, So you can see this is running at about 100.3 average decibels at the machine, which is pretty much where you're going to work. That's a loud beast, so you want to make sure you've got ear protection on this at all times. I'm going to wind the blade up so it's just above the material, and we're going to take a quick cut. Now that blade does have a brake on it, so it actually turned off pretty quickly, which is nice. And I now have a clean cut. My watch just come back up and said with my loud environment, sound levels hit 95 decibels, just 10 minutes at this level can cause temporary hearing loss. So there you go. So even my Apple Watch is telling me that this is way too noisy. Right, so we've now got a reasonable cut on here. So I'm now going to set this fence to 400. Drop in the doodle bongle, and now I should be able to take a nice cut here. Now I know this is only MDF, but that cut is as smooth as you like. Really, really nice cut. So I'm quite pleased with that. Now, one of the key projects I want to make with this table saw is actually cutting boards. And if you ever made a end grain cutting board, there's a lot of ripping and cross cutting involved. So in the next episode, we're actually going to make a cutting board purely to put this through its paces. And the one I'm making is a maple cutting board, and it's 25mm thick rough stock. So that should test it, see how good it is. Our little test board should now be 400mm long. And it is, it's bang on 400mm. And I want to bring my fence back in to 50mm, 5 centimeters. And we'll make a number of cuts at this. Now we've got dust extraction here at the back, and you can see at the back it's actually not too bad, but everywhere else is covered in dust. I've got dust on me, the bench has got dust on it, the machine's got dust on it. So dust collection is not awesome on this device, so there's a good chance you may also need to wear masks. But the accuracy of that cut you can't really fault. There's 4 50mm strips, and that's bang on, that's perfectly smooth. So let's see how well we actually did. So this strip is 49.7 at this end, and at this end it's coming in at 49.92, 49.83, 49.9, 49.9, 49.89, 49.98. Everything's 49mm, and there's about a 0.3, 0.4mm variance in the stock, and that's probably well within tolerance, I think. What I now want to do is just to drop 45-degree angle on this one. So I'm going to come into here, set that to 45. I'm just going to wind the blade so it's just at the top of the stock. And yep, that's good. That's come out at 90 degrees. So it seems to work. There's a few things I don't like about this already, just for transparency. As I was making that cut, certainly on the first one, because it caught me out, I was pushing this along, and that's okay, and I could reach around the blade quite happily. Now when I came in with my push stick and I continued to push, I was pushing down on the stock, and what happened here was my push stick fell into that thumb hole, that quick release thumb hole. And then as I did that, that just jerked the wood sidewards and just knocked me off the cut. You can probably just see ever so slightly knock me off the cut there. Now obviously that was just circumstance where I was doing quite a narrow rip cut there and just putting a 45-degree angle on that. But even so, I don't particularly like that design feature there. Dust collection isn't that good. So this is actually connected to a Festool CT26 at the moment, and that's a good dust collection device. And you can see the bench and the top and the machine is covered in dust, and we've not done a lot of cutting there. The back's not too bad, although there is some dust falling out of that. So dust collection's not the best. This fence here, I also noticed that once this fence was over at that, was it 400 mark, that cut we wanted to make at 400, this has got play in it. Can you see it? This has got play in it. It comes up and down. Now I don't really think that's going to be an issue, but it's well worth knowing that does give you play. Because imagine if you were fully extended on this, you know, making the maximum cut you can get, that's got quite a lot of play inside it. And if I come in with our square, if I come with our straight edge, yeah, that's basically not supporting the wood. So the chances are, if you were cutting a large panel and you were resting your large panel on this edge here, your panel would bow ever so slightly in the middle. That's obviously exaggerated, and that would not give you a perfect cut. May not be a problem for you. It's not going to be a problem for me, because when I design the cabinet this is going to sit inside of, there will be a flat surface here anyway, so this would never be supporting my stock. There'll be a flat surface either side of this that's going to support my stock. Okay, so that's it for this video, all about calibrating this and just doing those first checks. As we saw, calibration was easy. We managed to get the 45-degree calibrated, the 0 was okay. We've got the plate leveled off with the surface, which is fantastic. We've readjusted the gauge here, and we put it through some paces and made some very basic cuts, all of which came out pretty accurate and pretty much within tolerance. Next video, we're going to put this through its paces in anger, and I'm going to have a crack at making that maple cutting board, and that will really show this up for all it's worth. Hope you found it useful. See you next time on the Woodgrafter.